Okay, this is a short video on how turbochargers work. It's going to be pretty concise. Let's get right to it. Number one, what does a turbocharger do? Why? And how does it work, of course? The simplest definition that I can give is a turbocharger utilizes exhaust gases to compress intake gases and feed them into the motor. Second question that we're going to answer is why. Why does a turbocharger do this? The simplest definition that I can give here, without leaving out too much information, is you want to break down an engine. What does an engine do? An engine utilizes a chemical reaction, the burning of exhaust gases, the burning of fuel to the fuel expands, right? And we're going to harness that expansion of the gases via a piston and a cylinder to create up and down motion with a piston, and then we're going to use a crankshaft to rotate that up and down motion into rotational motion, which we're going to put through a transmission and make the car go forward. So now people ask the question, how can we make more power from this reaction? Well, the limiting reaction inside of an engine is usually oxygen. We can cram like a lot of fuel in there. That's pretty simple, but we need oxygen to burn that fuel. So how can we increase the oxygen that gets into the motor? Well, the old answer to this problem was to increase displacement. You hear all the old timers, there's no replacement for displacement. It's because with larger displacement, let's say a 6-liter V8 versus a 2-liter 4-cylinder is going to have more oxygen in the cylinders, at a certain time, and can burn more fuel very easily, even without the help of a turbocharger or supercharger. But now let's say we have a little 4-cylinder motor, a 2-liter, and we slap one of these turbochargers on it. We can compress that gas that's going into the motor, and we have more oxygen per unit volume. So we have more oxygen in a 2-liter motor when we have a turbocharger compressing gas, feeding that engine, than we would if the motor was naturally aspirated, which is a fancy way to say non-turbocharged, or some people call it normally aspirated. Alright, that's enough of that. Now let's get down to how. How does it work? Well, a turbocharger utilizes exhaust gases, as aforementioned. Exhaust gases come up through here, go through this area, right? Here's a little turbine. As exhaust gases go up, you can imagine if I were to blow on this, it would rotate. Exhaust gases are going to rotate this half of the shaft, and then they're going to come out through this side of the turbo, down through what's called the downpipe, and ultimately out the exhaust of your car. On the other side of the shaft, bolted to the shaft, we have the intake side, or the cold side of the turbo. There's a part here I'm missing, but ignore that. So this guy will rotate at the same velocity that this guy rotates. So as our exhaust gases come up, we're accelerating. Exhaust gases are coming, looping around the turbo, spinning the shaft. As this guy rotates, it's going to pull air through this side of the turbo. It's going to suck it in. It's going to compress it around this housing. And it's going to dump it out through this side of the turbo. Exhaust gases are going to come in, get compressed, and shoot out this side. Now, when we accelerate, we only want to put so much pressure on the engine or else we'll ruin it. So that leads us to this little guy right here. This is called a wastegate. And what happens is we have some plumbing set up. That's what this guy is used for. Senses the pressure. Uses a system called a wastegate actuator. You can Google it if you'd like. And when it senses a certain amount of pressure coming out from that side of the turbo, it's going to extend a little arm. It's going to open this valve. And this part right here is what the wastegate is. The exhaust gases want to flow to the path of least resistance. So they're going to come in and go right out the wastegate instead of continuing to spool the turbine, which is just going to compress more gas and feed the motor. We don't want to do that because we can hurt the motor. So I've answered what does the turbo do? Why do we want to compress our intake, and feed the engine compressed gas? And I've answered how the turbocharger works. I've left a lot of things out, like the type of bearings that it uses. There's journal bearings, and then there's ball bearing turbos, which have significantly less friction on this shafts of the turbo. And you can watch people online. They'll just hold this end, breathe into that, and the turbo will rotate for minutes, some of them. It's crazy. They're significantly more expensive. I've left out types of wastegates. This is an internal wastegate, meaning it's inside of the turbo. Some of them just plumb the wastegate from the up pipe, so you're letting the exhaust out before it even gets to the turbo. A little bit bigger setups, the trim of the turbo, the intake versus the exhaust, and boosting pressures and stuff like that. So I mean, they're pretty they can get pretty complicated, but just to get your feet wet, get you understanding what a turbocharger does, I feel like this was pretty concise, to the point. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know.